A family of 3 is sitting on a dinner table, devouring the food given to them. It was no other than the classic egg fry. It is revealed by the man, they are expecting a guest, to which, a family member even seems surprised. We are moved to a scene, where a person in a black suit was coming through the woods and finally reaches a mysterious door and slowly knocks. The same man from the dinner table comes and takes him into a room, deep inside the bunker. To the guest's surprise, not even a single window is present inside this room, which looked buried deep inside the bunker. The man is desperate for some lake view, but the owner refuses him, saying that the nature is right outside the door. Owner asks for the room rent, but the man is poor and barely have money to pay. The owner gives him his money back, instead ask him to help him out around the house. Owner himself gives him a nice and warm foot bath as well. Later, he is sitting at the dinner table, along with owner's wife, and devour his dumplings, while the owner writes something in his diary, as if he was counting how many dumplings were eaten by everyone. It is revealed, this guy is from the city, he needed some peace to pursue his work, which requires complete concentration. This surprises the husband and wife, where the owner desperately asks if he was writing a book. The guest asks if they both know about Higgs particle, but they barely have any clue of what he was talking about, but seemed interested regardless. Suddenly, a scary sound of a man comes behind the guest, calling the woman his mother and asking for a lullaby to be sung for him to be able to sleep. The shadow of the mysterious son was enough for him to creep the hell out of him. The woman walks away to help her son out, while the owner revealed his son's name is Klaus. The scene is moved to guest's bedtime, where he turns off the lights and wakes up the next morning as if it was just a moment of sleep. We can see him getting himself ready for the work and concentration. He begins to write something, but someone knocks on the door. The owner, who was just looking at his library, but for some reason, asked if the guest ever needed some help and leaves right after, hence disturbing his peace. This made the guest little upset. Next, the woman is getting ready for something, and whispers a name, Heinrich, after going inside some mysterious room. She later mentions to the man how she talked to Heinrich, who was worried that their son was barely making any progress. The women suggest the man to hand over the teaching of Klaus to the guest, whereas his father was Klaus's current teacher. He argues, but the woman was determined about the decisions and tell the man to focus on other talents that he possesses. We see the man cleaning the kitchen, where the guest arrives and proceed to drink some cold water. Not too long after, the landlord mentions about him eating a bit too much food last night, to which, the guest replies if he is too greedy. Indirectly, the man was trying him to be their son's teacher, but the man denies his request, saying he got too much work to pursue with little time. The guest also mentions how he will control his appetite from next time. Later on, the dinner is served and the women started to cry in front of him, which is regarding to her child, who was not progressing in his studies as mentioned by her. She desperately asked the guest to help her son out, while touching his hands and feeding him some soup. Again he sleeps off through the night. Next morning, he is introduced to their dumb child Klaus. The owner even suggests him to use manpower, in case Klaus did not make any progress. Klaus looked scared and devastated and barely wanted to learn from books. Guest started to just read something for Klaus, but he seemed as his brain was just not made to be learned something, even though he spent hours and hours on him. So he tries a trick and calls his parents, who sits in front of them, where he is able to answer all the questions. But the father suspects something is wrong and asks a really hard question: capital of Turkmenistan. Little did he know, Claude had given all the answers written on his hands, to be able to fool his parents. The mother was more happier than ever and calls the guest a tutor and takes the boy away for some sort of reward. Later on, the owner can be seen using makeup of some sort. He reads everyone a weird book and makes his son and wife laugh, but not the guest. This is definitely taking a toll on the guest, and soon after, the mother decide to put Claude to bed. While putting him to bed, the woman says she is proud of him. The son hesitantly tells her that he is hungry and wants some food. To which, his mother, tell him to ask Heinrich about it. Suddenly, something started to happen to her, as if some monster came out of her. The monster suggests her to feed him in a scary voice. She slowly unbuttons her shirt and opens herself to hungry Claude. He desperately moves his head towards her, and begin to satisfy his hunger, which lasts quite a while. Meanwhile, Guest is not able to focus, since most of his time goes on teaching Claude. We are moved to the scene, where Claude is reading a book and Guest is teaching him with some frustration. He come across the word called being, to which, the man answers, but still his dumb brain could not process it and he asks for it again. It is revealed the boy thinks he is still 8 years old and never been taught anywhere else than home. He also believes that he will be a president one day. Suddenly, he leaves upon hearing the school bell. Later, the whole family is devouring the food along with the guest. There he points out about their ignorant plan of thinking Claude being a president, but he clarifies to them that Claude might be not capable of it. This makes them angry. However, Guest still insisted on their belief to be false. They end up asking him one more question, but, as expected, he answer it wrong, to which, Claude is taken somewhere by his mother. The mother comes back with Claude. They move into a different room, where he was given a small punishment for not studying well. Seeing this brutality, the man stands up for Claude, where the owner begins to punish him instead. Later on, the guest again encounter Claude satisfying his hunger by latching on to the women's obvious thing, where the guy mentions he is not able to concentrate in this place. We can see, he is not able to sleep due to storming outside. He comes inside the kitchen to eat something, but hears a noise, where a woman was talking to someone, perhaps her imagination. He slowly asks, who she is talking to which, she mentions Heinrich, who she suggests is something beautiful. She reveals, how Heinrich met her for the first time, when she was a little child, visited her every night for a while. One day he got sick and moved in with her. She shows him a wound on her leg and tell him to be not afraid of Heinrich. He slowly comes near her leg and proceed to touch it, where he also hears the scary sound, which suggests him to help Claude and in return she will help him. Once again, the guy is teaching Claude and going crazy and calls him useless. He has no choice, but to use the stick and be strict to Klaus or he will suffer the consequences himself, like the last time. He is surprised to see, Klaus was answering him correctly upon hitting him with a stick. Klaus is finally able to remember all the answers correctly and the women start to look at the guest with desperation. Later she arrives in his room, looks at him and take away her clothes. She begin to do something to him, satisfy his hunger and giving herself up totally for his enjoyment. Day by day, the son was getting better at remembering information, which they all celebrate at the dinner table. While sitting in the classroom, Klaus looked devastated and sad, where the guest also noticed he is looking pale. To make things interesting, he decided to play a game with him. But, Klaus has never played any game in his life. This led both of them to play games for hours and Klaus loved doing it along with the guest himself. This was disliked by the women and she leaves. We can see the women once again getting ready for something and comes back in Klaus' room to help him out. She hugs Klaus and kisses him back to back, but Klaus did not want to cuddle. After taking a closer look at him, she leaves in utter frustration. The women can be seen talking to the monster again, telling it how Klaus is acting strangely. Monster suggests her to stop the guest from teaching him or Klaus will leave them, hence making her cry. At this point she is determined to take the guest out of her house. One day, Klaus comes into guest's room and asks if he could write something in his friendship book. He start to ask him about the work and finally ask him to sleep in his room instead of his own because he get nightmares. Guest is left with no choice, so he lets him sleep with him on his bed. Later at night, Klaus wakes him up to remind him of his birthday the next morning. Next day, Klaus is given new clothes on his birthday and his parents along with guest were celebrating his birthday. Later they give him a present, which is a statue of a president. After a while, guest is given a diploma and retirement for finishing his teaching with Klaus. This was shocking for both Klaus and the guest, but parents could not be more happier seeing him go away. There was not much the guest could really do. He was watching them as if he could not bear the pain anymore and finally loses his mind and attacks the owner, while the woman was dancing with Klaus. Suddenly, something happens to Klaus and he faints down in front of everyone. His parents are feeding him some liquid food, but he didn't want to eat it. Seeing his condition, guest finally decide to move away from the location and pack up his bags. Before leaving, he come across Klaus's notebook, in which there was nothing but a drawing of him along with Klaus calling him as his best friend. Later we can see the guest sneaking inside Klaus's room, and calls his name to wake him up. He was about to call his mother, but hugs him instead. He carry him on his shoulders and slowly proceed to come down the stairs, which wakes the women up. Not only that, but he also meets the house owner on his way, who faints down since he was drunk. Women comes down the stairs and find the guest along with Klaus and picks up a knife. Guest sees the women standing next to him and slowly moves toward her to kiss her, but little did he know, he will be stabbed by her. We can see the same man, laying on the bed injured, while Klaus walks in and is shocked to see him in this condition. Klaus takes his coat, wears it and decide to finally leave the house on his own. Women carefully watch him and slaps him 2 times, before the struggle between them starts, and Klaus ends up hitting her injured leg. After taking a look at the women, Klaus finally meets his father waiting on the door for him, and steps outside along with guest's bag. We can see him going through the snow and woods, all alone without anyone's support. Meanwhile, the woman is again getting ready for something special. At this point she looks totally changed, her clothing and behavior, while the guest is seen taking care of the house as a servant and the story ends here. To watch more mystery recaps like this, support and recaps by liking and subscribing.